Good evening.
Evening.
I'm not Jacob, but I'm filling in for him. It's good to see you here tonight. Good to have you visiting with us if you're visiting with us. We're going to take a break from the minor prophets. Jacob's been going through the minor prophets for some time. He was joking with me that I was going so slow through Revelation at one point that he was going to finish all the minor prophets before I did, but I may finish Revelation on Sunday morning. I don't know. We'll see. We're close. But we're going to do something different tonight. We're going to be over in Joshua chapter 6. Is where we're going to focus on tonight. I like watching old TV shows. If you don't want to pay for cable, if you don't want to have to pay for TV, as long as you've got internet, you can stream things on Pluto TV for free. It doesn't cost you anything. And you can watch a whole bunch of old TV shows that they have on there. They have one channel that's dedicated to the old Mission Impossible shows. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those or watched any of those, but it's Mission Impossible, right? That's the whole idea behind the show. It's not, mission tough. It's not mission difficult. It's not mission challenging. It's mission impossible because they're given these tasks and you don't see how it is that they're going to possibly be able to get it done, right? They call them the impossible mission force. And they always start the show the same way, right? It's whoever the leader of the group is. The first season, it was Mr. Briggs. Wow. The after that, after the first season, it was Mr. Phelps because they changed actors in there and changed characters, and so they always go and they get the pictures and they listen to the tape, and it's your mission should you choose to accept it. And when we think about what goes on here in Joshua chapter 6 and the Battle of Jericho, and we consider those heroes that are in the Old Testament, just think about Joshua and the task that he was given. He's the leader of the Israelites now. Moses has passed on, and so that torch has been passed to Joshua. He's now the leader of the people, and he's going to bring them into the land of Canaan. Now, they've come across the Jordan River at flood stage, by the way. They've come across the Jordan River and it's been dried up for them. And so they've come across there on dry ground, just like Moses and the children of Israel came across the Red Sea on dry ground. And so they are in the land of Canaan now. And so he is the one who's going to lead the children of Israel now to take the land of Canaan. If you remember 40 years prior to this, they said it couldn't be done, right? The spies went into the land 40 years before this, and they spied out the land to see what it was like, and they said, yes, it is a land that flows with milk and honey, and here's some of the produce. And they had a bunch of grapes that two men were carrying on a pole, and between them, just imagine how big either how big those grapes were, right? Maybe like watermelons, or else there was just a lot of grapes on that cluster, but it was huge, right? The amount of fruit. And so they said it's a great place, but the cities are fortified, there's people everywhere, and the giants are there, and it's an impossible task. It's an impossible mission. There's no way that we can do this. And so they had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and now it's 40 years later. Joshua is 40 years older. And if you think about your life, those of you that are over the age of 40, think about what things were like 40 years ago for you. 40 years ago, I was 19 and I felt like I was indestructible. And my mind still thinks I can do some of those things, but my body says, what are you thinking? What were you thinking? And so we're maybe not as capable, but Joshua here doesn't worry about any of that. He's given what looks like an impossible task from a human perspective to go in and to take this. Just consider the facts as far as what he's got to do. The first city that they come to is Jericho. And Jericho, according to archaeology, Jericho was a city that had a double wall around it. So you think about a fortified city. A fortified city's got a wall around it. You got usually one gate. The gate's very well protected because that's the way in and the way out. Well, Jericho's got two walls around it. It's got a double wall system. So not just fortified with one wall, there's a second wall. The outer wall, from what archaeologists have found, the outer wall was thought to have been about 23 feet high and 6 feet thick at its base. got a wall around the city that's 20. How are you going to get over a wall that's 23? I mean, Joe can stand on my shoulders maybe, and we'll try to reach it to 23 feet, right? Is pretty high. And so that's the outer wall. Well, if you were able to get past that wall, right? If you somehow got past that first wall, then behind that first wall, there's an embankment that leads up to another wall that is 30 feet tall and at its base 12 feet thick. So you haven't really accomplished anything by defeating the city by getting past that first wall. Now you got a bigger wall to get through. So those walls and those gates that made Jericho a fortress, if you will. And as the children of Israel approached, we're told that it was shut up tight. Notice in Joshua chapter 6 and verse 1, it says, Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And so it was shut up, right? It wasn't just shut up, it was shut up securely. It was shut up so securely that the text tells us no one was getting in or going out. So not just that it's closed for business, right? But it's sort of sealed, if you will, that there's no traffic moving in or out. And so how are they going to get in there in order to defeat them? Because you got this fortified city that is shut up. Israel didn't have any siege equipment. Right there, I mean, they're not like professional soldiers. They're not like the Roman army. They're not like the Greeks, right? They're not like those that are going to come later that are going to have these various different weapons, if you will, to be able to breach the walls. Normally, if you were attacking a walled city, you'd have to have something to be able to breach those walls. They'd have a battering ram, which it would look sort of like a little cart. It'd have sort of a roof on it to protect the people from arrows or things that are being poured on them from above on the wall. And so it'd have some sort of covering. And then underneath that, inside the covering, you'd have the men who would push that, would be on wheels, and they would push that thing to get it up against the wall. And then inside, you would have a log probably, or that would be pointed at one end, right? And so you would swing that back and then let it go so that that pointed end would slam into the wall. And you'd keep doing that back and forth to try to breach a hole in the wall so that you could go in and get into the city. And so, but children of Israel don't have any battering rams. They don't have any ballistas. A ballista would look like a great big catapult, right? And so it would fire a projectile into the wall, knock some of the wall down. They didn't have any trebuchets. If you don't know what a trebuchet is, you can look it up and see the picture, but it sort of has a counterweight with it, and it looks like a giant sling, right? So you put a boulder in there, and the counterweight causes that thing to kind of spin around, and then it throws that boulder into the wall, right? They don't have any of that. They don't even have any ramps or stairs, right? That they would be able to wheel up or push up against the wall and be able to climb up there and get over the top of it. They don't have any bazookas. They don't have any tanks. They don't have any artillery, right? It's just them. And that's all that they have. And so Israel doesn't have any of these siege weapons to be able to conquer Jericho. And so for them to siege Jericho, for them to be able to conquer Jericho, looks like an impossible task. It looks like an impossible mission. But they're not going to be alone in the fight. They're not. If it was just them, they wouldn't have a chance of being successful. But it's not going to be just them in the fight. Come back to the beginning of Joshua, in chapter 1. In verse 5, they're not going to be alone. God tells Joshua, "No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you, and I will not leave you nor forsake you." Joshua is not going to have to be alone in this. The children of Israel are not going to have to be alone in this, because who's going to be with them? God is, right? Does it matter how tough the other side is if you've got God? Does it matter how impossible the mission looks if you've got God? So they're not going to be alone. They just need to be strong and courageous. Notice what he goes on to say there in chapter 1, beginning in verse 6. God tells Joshua, "Be strong and of good courage, for to this people you shall divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go." He says they need to be strong, they need to be courageous, they need to follow what it is that God has told them to do. He says, don't depart to the right hand or to the left. Sometimes people do that today with the Word of God, with the New Testament. They depart to the right or to the left. They don't follow the path that Scripture lays out for us. Those that are binding things that God has not bound, they're departing to the right. Those who are loosing things that God has not loosed, they're departing to the left. He says, don't do that. You follow the path. He's telling Joshua, don't depart to the right hand or to the left. In verse 8, he says, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. You want to have good success? Meditate on the law of the Lord. You want to have good success? Follow the commandments that God has laid out for you. He says in verse 9, have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So they're not going to be alone in this fight. They're not going to be alone in this battle. God's going to be with them, but they need to do what it is that God tells them to do. And so God will fight for them, but they must be faithful to him. And so they need a plan. They need a battle plan, right? Just like on the TV show Mission Impossible, when they find out what their mission is, it's either up to Mr. Briggs or Mr. Phelps or whoever is the leader of the team, that they have to come up with a plan to be successful. And on the TV show, it's the intricacies, right, of the plan. It's what makes them successful is not that they've got some sort of superhuman strength. It's not because they can fly like Superman, right? It's because of the genius that's in the plan, that a lot of times they get the enemy to fight against themselves. And so they overcome them that way. And so it's the plan that makes it. So for Israel to be victorious, right, we're going to have a good battle plan, right? And we're going to see the battle plan comes from the Lord himself. And if you get the battle plan from the Lord, what better battle plan can you get than what you get from God, right? Now, we read verse 1 of chapter 6, but this is actually a bad chapter break. Sometimes when you're reading through scriptures and you get to the end of a chapter and the beginning of another chapter, sometimes that break is a natural break, and sometimes it's not, because the chapter breaks are put in there by men. Really, this starts back in chapter 5, verse 13. What's going to happen here? In Joshua 5, verses 13 through 15, it says, it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, are you for us or for our adversaries? So he said, no, but as commander of the army of the Lord I have now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped, and said to him, what does my Lord say to his servant? Then the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, take your sandal off of your foot, for the place where you stand is holy. And Joshua did so. So here's Joshua. He's getting ready. He's overlooking sort of, where they're going, where the first battle is going to take place. And he's standing nearby to Jericho. And there's another man that's standing over there, appears to be a man, has his sword drawn, so not in the scabbard, but has the sword drawn and in his hand. And he identifies himself here as the captain of the Lord's host, or as the commander of the Lord's army. And he's the one that's going to eventually tell Joshua what needs to be done. Joshua is out here, he's scouting, he's alone. Behold, there's this man, right, who's standing there opposite him. And so when you think about, the man standing there with the sword in his hand, does that remind you of anything else? Yeah. Balaam, right, was on his donkey, and he was going to go and try to curse the children of Israel. And the donkey sees it first. He sees the angel of the Lord with a sword drawn in his hand in the way. And so the donkey goes off to one side, and Balaam beats the donkey. And then, he's there, and he smashes Balaam's foot against the wall the second time. And then the third time, donkey just sort of sits down because there's nowhere to turn around even. And then Balaam's eyes are open, and he's able to see the angel of the Lord there with the sword.
So is this man an angel?
Well,
without it being identified that way, that's what I think he probably is, because the leader is Joshua, and then all of a sudden this guy shows up. I'm the leader of God's.
But it could have been a pre-incarnate Christ.
Yeah, exactly.
What does Joshua do in verse 14? Falls on his face and worshiped him. Do angels accept worship?
No.
No. Right. We saw this in Revelation chapter 22, or we're about to see this in Revelation chapter 22. But in Revelation chapter 22, verses 8 and 9, as John is being shown these various visions, He says, "Now I, John," in verse 8 of Revelation 22, "Now I, John, saw and heard these things. And when I heard and saw, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel who showed me these things. And he said to me, See, do you not do that? For I am your fellow servant and of your brethren, the prophets, and of those who keep the words of this book, worship God." There are times where the angel of the Lord appears and people worship him and he accepts worship. Now, who accepts worship? Angels don't, just regular old angels don't accept worship, but who does? Well, Satan would, right? But God does, right? And the angel tells John, worship God. Don't worship me, don't worship angels. But you need to worship God. So the fact that Joshua here is worshiping and he's accepting the worship would indicate that this
Well,
is he's not refusing it.
it's accepting it. You're just not refusing it.
Well, he's not refusing it, but an ordinary angel would have, because the angel
Maybe
in Revelation 22 refused it. You would maybe agree with me. Okay.
sometimes.
Sometimes. Okay.
Let's don't to the Bible what is not. Just
There,
thought I'd say that.
yeah, there are times where it talks about an angel of the Lord, and it's just an angel of the Lord. It doesn't specify that it's deity. So you have to look at the context of where it is.
I-
There, I know you do. There are times where it says the angel of the Lord, and that personage accepts worship, and it indicates that it's deity. Here, it's not just that it's not just the angel accepting the worship, but if there was any doubt, verse 15 removes that doubt when the angel says, "Take your sandals off your feet, because this is holy ground." What makes it holy ground? God's presence does, right? It's not holy ground because we're close to Jericho and that's someplace special. It's holy ground because deity is there. Because this came up before, this taking your sandals off because the place where you are is holy ground. Who said that? It was said to Moses, right? But who was it that appeared to Moses and said that? In Exodus chapter 3, it says, "The angel of the Lord called to Moses from a burning bush, the angel of the Lord, and he turned aside to see what was going on. And the Lord, Yahweh, spoke to him." So the angel of the Lord there is identified. Most people believe it's the pre-incarnate Christ, that the angel of the Lord is the second person of the Godhead. Because there are other places in the New Testament, like when Jesus says, "I am," right, that he's referring back to the burning bush when he told Moses, "I am has sent you." That before before Abraham was, "I am." So Jesus identifies himself with that personage, right, who would be. And so you've got what's considered to be a theophany, right? It's called a theophany. It's a manifestation of deity, but in human form, right? So you don't, no one saw God. He didn't see his face, right? If you will. But he sees this manifestation. Yes.
Genesis 18, uh, when Abraham is in his tent, he comes outside and it specifies in verse 2, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and all three men were standing in front of him, but he knew that was. So, I mean, it could have been, because it was God. And that's when Sarah, eventually laughs at him
Right.
from the tent. So, I mean, it's entirely possible that Joshua knew that person.
Well, if he didn't know when he bowed down to worship, or because that word for bow, that word for worship there is the same word that you can use for bowing down, right? So is he bowing down just because, okay, this is a superior person because he's the commander of the Lord's army, or is he bowing down to worship? You can maybe question that. But verse 15 doesn't leave any doubt. And then when you get into chapter 6 in verse 2, it says, "And the Lord, Yahweh, said to Joshua, See, I have given Jericho into your hand." So he's talking to this man, he's talking to the commander of the Lord's army, and it says it's the Lord, it's Yahweh, who is telling him what it is that he has to do. He's the one that's given him the battle plan. Um, and so it shows that, before Christ came to earth, he's active in the world. He's active in history, if you will. And so there are various different times. Again, you have to look at the context to see, is this talking about just an angel of the Lord, or is it talking about the angel of the Lord there? So 22 verses 8 and 9. So he's referred to here as the commander. So he says, "No, I have come as commander. So I have come as this, right? I've come as commander of the army of the Lord." And so here's the plan. Here's the battle plan that we're going to have to take Jericho. Beginning in verse 2, Joshua 6. says, the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all you men of war, you shall go around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that the people shall shout with a great shout. Then the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up every man straight before him. If you just looked at that battle plan through like human worldly eyes, you'd be like, what? What are we going to do? We're going to march around the city and the walls are going to fall down.
Okay, now I'm going to use that what, and let's apply it to the people inside the city, particularly the soldiers, watching this idiocy going on, quotation marks,
Yeah,
watching this idiocy going on for how many days altogether?
7.
Okay, 7 days altogether. And they don't feel any need to kill any of them. What is going on here? Talk about deception.
Yeah.
They were as to what was going on, and they thought we're impregnable. We're impregnable.
Well, they may have thought that.
I would think
They may have thought that, but they were scared of the children of Israel because they had heard. And when the spies come into Rahab's
they were
place,
scared enough to fight them before, when they could easily have done it.
well, depending on if they're in range or not, yeah. It doesn't say how far away they were when
Yeah,
they went
that's
marched
true.
around, but
But they catapults and everything. They would have the whole deal.
they would have had some things, yeah, yeah. But they're afraid because they've heard, and Rahab talks about when the spies come in, how the people are afraid because they've heard what God did to Egypt. They've heard what God did to Sihon and Og on the other side of the river. They've heard that that the rivers been dried up and they've come across, and so they're afraid in Jericho. And but these are the battle tactics designed by God,
I
and so
think afraid and confused
yeah.
what is going on.
Well, God does that a lot. God confuses the enemy a lot of times in the battles, right? And that's why the children of Israel are successful, because the enemy ends up fighting themselves a lot of times, unwittingly, right? And panics. You've got Gideon, it's going to come later on with 300 men, and they've got what, a trumpet and a torch, right? And so 300 guys with a trumpet and a torch, and they're going to be successful against thousands of troops. But if you want to be, or one guy with a sling. Yeah. Um, but these battle tactics are designed by God. And if you want to be successful, what should you do? You should do what God said to do, right? If you want to be successful, whether it makes sense to you or not, you should do what it is that God said to do. So they're going to circle the city once each day for 6 days, and this may be psychological warfare on the part of God because they're afraid of the children of Israel, right? And so they might be up there on the wall. What's going on? Well, they're marching. What are they doing? They're just marching around the city. They're just marching around the city. They're not doing anything else. No, just marching around the city. They go around one time and they stop. Right. The next day they come around, and so the men, that are on the walls or whatever, or that are in Jericho that are watching this, they may have been taunting, they may have been shouting things maybe at the beginning, like armies sometimes do. They'll line up for battle and they'll taunt one another and shout back and forth. There may have been some of that going on the first few days, but maybe, after 3 days, after 4 days, they're probably scratching their head wondering what in the wide world are they doing, right, out there, that they're doing this. And so the air is sort of full of anticipation, if you will. And then just imagine what they must have thought on that 7th day. That okay, hey, they're going around the second time. Well, hey, they're going around a third time. And the children of Israel aren't saying anything. They're just marching around the city. They're not saying anything. And so these folks would have, they were afraid, but they were also very suspicious. They were very superstitious. If you had some sort of omen, right? If there were some, crows or whatever, oh, that's a bad omen that there's these crows. You know what you call a flock of crows? You don't call them a flock. You know what you call them? Anybody know? Because you got like a gaggle of geese, right? Crows. Murder of crows, right? A murder of crows. And so if you had a bunch of crows, that was considered like a bad omen. So these folks are very superstitious. And so as they're doing this, these folks have got to be wondering, what is going on?
They have thought about the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah. Well, they would have probably seen that as an idol. right? Because the Philistines definitely saw it as an idol. The Canaanites would have probably seen that as an idol. So on the seventh day, they're going to circle 7 times. The priests are going to blow the trumpets, and the men are going to shout, and the walls are going to fall down, and you're going to take the city. And so, again, from a worldly perspective, through human eyes, we might say, well, how are they going to be successful in doing this? And just imagine the amount of courage it must have taken for Joshua and for the children of Israel to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to follow this particular battle plan. Because, see, here's the thing. God didn't need for them to do something great. He didn't need for the children of Israel to do some sort of superhuman thing, to do something great in order to win this battle. All God needed was for them to be faithful. That's all he required. That was all that's going to be necessary to have victory, is for them to be faithful.
His way.
Do it his way.
You only had 7 priests and 7 trumpets there to go. It wasn't a bunch of them.
No, 7, yeah. Yeah, so they didn't even have a full band, right? Yeah, hardly had a whole brass section with just 7 horns, right? He didn't need it. All he needed for them to do was to be faithful and to do what God instructed them to do. And so they did that. They did what God told them to do. In verse 8, it says, so it was when Joshua had spoken to the people that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets, ram's horns before the Lord, advanced and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpet. The rear guard came after the ark, and the priests continued blowing the trumpets. Joshua had commanded the people, saying, you shall not shout or make any noise with your voice, nor shall a word proceed out of your mouth until the day I say to you, shout, then you shall shout. So he had the ark of the Lord circle the city, going around it once, and they came to the camp and lodged in the camp. They rose early in the next morning. The priests took up the ark of the Lord, 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets. Before the ark went continually and blew with the trumpets. The armed men went before them, but the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. Second day they marched around the city once, returned to the camp, so they did for 6 days. But it came to pass on the 7th day, they rose early about the dawning of the day and marched around the city 7 times the same manner. On that day only, they marched around the city 7 times. And the 7th time it happened when the priests blew the trumpets that Joshua said to the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. And skip down to verse 20. It says, so the people shouted when the priests blew the trumpets. And it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. And the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city.
7 days, 7th trumpet, 7 priests. What is the significance to the Jews of the number 7?
To them, the number 7 was for perfection.
I'd say that's pretty much what this battle was, this
Yeah.
impossible battle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's God's perfect, right? And so the 7 seems to represent the things that God wants to have done. So you see a lot of 7s in the Bible. You see a lot of 7s in the book of Revelation for sure. Archaeology has shown that the walls of Jericho did not fall inward. When you besieged a city and you tore down the wall or you made a breach in the wall, you would hit the wall from outside. When you hit the wall from outside, which way is it going to fall? It's going to fall the other way. It's going to fall inward. Archaeology has shown that the walls of Jericho did not fall inward, they fell outward.
And then a part of the wall did not fall.
And a part of the wall did not fall, right? Which is where Rahab's house probably was. Her house was on the wall. In between those 2 walls, in that section there, you'd have some poorer folks that would live. And so her house was there. But archaeology has shown that the walls of Jericho didn't fall inward. That's what you would expect. They fell outward and basically made a ramp, because the walls fell down outward, and now you've got a ramp. You don't have to worry about. You just climb right up into the city. And so it made it easier for them to take it. And so they were successful in defeating Jericho. They were successful because they followed God's plan. This isn't recorded for us just so that we'll have a cool story to tell the kids. We want to think about facing our Jericho. Not everything happens in history is part of the Bible. Right? We don't have hardly anything about Alexander the Great and his conquering and what the Greeks did, as far as when you think about world history at the time. We don't have anything about Julius Caesar and the conquering that he did, and wanting to be made emperor and all. We don't have any of that, but we have stories that are in here because the stories have spiritual significance, right? That there's a lesson in there for us. And that's what Paul tells us in Romans chapter 15 and verse 4, that the things that are written aforetime were written for our learning, right? That we can have comfort and hope through the scriptures. And so there's something in here that's written, that's recorded for us, because there's a lesson in here for us as well. There's something in here for our learning. They were going into the land of Canaan. They didn't have a fortress. They didn't have a house. They didn't have, a place where they could retreat to. They're going to be out in the field, if you will, surrounded by the enemy. And we feel pretty safe when we're inside the building because we're with one another and we're around one another. But when we go outside of those doors and we go back out into the world, as Christians, we live in a world where we're surrounded. We live in a world where we're outnumbered. And they were going into a land where they were going to be surrounded. They were going to be outnumbered. In Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 1, as Moses is giving instructions to the children of Israel before he passes, he says in Deuteronomy 7:1, when the Lord your God brings you into the land which you go to possess, and has cast out many nations before you, and he lists them, the Hittites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, and then he says, these 7 nations are greater and mightier than you. They were going to go in and they were going to battle against 7 nations. 7 again. 7 nations that are greater and mightier than you. And so they were going to be outnumbered. They were going to be surrounded. They were going to be overpowered, if you will, by the others. They weren't going to do this by their own strength. Israel was not going to be successful, right? For Israel, they cannot rely upon their own strength. They need to rely upon the Lord.
Way of telling how much time had passed since Moses had died and this battle is about to start. Any idea? Because Joshua is the leader in this, and Moses is gone. So the people involved in this have lost the leader that they're very much accustomed to.
They have, but Moses anointed Joshua to be the next leader. The people knew that he was God's chosen man to do that. There's a mourning period after Moses dies. I want to say it's 30 days, but don't quote me on that. I'd have to go back and look at the specifics. But there's a mourning period after Moses passes away. And then they cross over the Jordan River. They take the stones. They set up the monument that's there. They go to Gilgal. The men are circumcised at Gilgal. Once adult men are circumcised, they're not going to be able to go out on the battlefield for a certain time period, right? They're going to need. So hard to tell exactly how long it is. I would say it's probably less than a year, but hard to tell exactly. It doesn't give us a real good time stamp as far as.
They get accustomed to Joshua that they knew was going to be the next leader anyway.
A little bit, because when they, like I said, when they get to Gilgal, the men are circumcised, and I think they partake of the Passover there, right? So that you've got a Passover that takes place there, and I don't know, I don't remember. Maybe it was Numbers 19. The Passover was before the 40 years of wandering, right? And so this Passover is after the 40 years of wandering. So,
Sounds reasonable.
yeah,
Less than a year.
yeah, probably less than a year. So because we're surrounded and we're outnumbered, we can't rely on our own strength either, right? Like Israel couldn't rely on their strength to be successful. We can't rely on our own strength in order to be successful. We need to rely upon the Lord. Even though we're in this situation, even though we're outnumbered, even though we're surrounded, it's no reason for us to go run and hide somewhere, right? Because God's given us a mission, and our mission is not to run and hide to some monastery. It's not to run and hide to some cave. It's not to do that. The Lord has given us marching orders, just like the Lord gave Israel their marching orders. He says, you literally march around the city 7 times, right? Once a day for 6 days, and then 7 times. So they had their marching orders, if you will. He's given us our marching orders in Matthew chapter 28, beginning in verse 18. Jesus says, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you. And lo, I'm with you always, even until the end of the age. And so he's given us our marching orders, and they're not to run and hide from the enemy because we're outnumbered, but it's to spread the gospel. It's to spread the good news. And we can look around at the world around us, and we can say to ourselves, they don't want to listen to me. I could go and tell them about Jesus, but they don't want to listen to me about that. They're not interested in God. You can tell by their lifestyle or what it is that they're doing that they're not interested in God. So why would I go talk to them? If I talk to them about Jesus, if I talk to them about God, if I talk to them about spiritual things, maybe my coworkers in the workplace, they're going to treat me differently. They're not going to treat me the same way that they did before. Maybe they won't like me. Maybe they'll be mean to me. Maybe, so sometimes we can be like the Israel of Numbers 14 rather than being like the Israel of Joshua 6. In Numbers chapter 14, the spies had come back and they had brought this evil report. They said, we can't take this land. This is impossible. Why have you brought us out here to do this? This is a mission impossible. We can't defeat these people. There are giants that are in there. And it says that the hearts of the people melted. Notice in Numbers 14, verses 1 through 4, it says, so all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night, and all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness. God can fix that for them, right? They say, well, if only we had died in Egypt. God can take care of that for you. If only we had died in this wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us select a leader and return to Egypt. They are rejecting Moses and Aaron here and saying, we're going to elect a new leader and we're going to go back to Egypt. What a slap in the face that would be to God, right? For them. And so we don't want to be like the Israel in Numbers 14 and say, well, this is a mission impossible that God has given us, because there are people out there that want to hear the truth. There are people out there that, even though they may not look like they're living a wholesome lifestyle, would be open to listening to the gospel. There are folks that have been in prison that have listened to the gospel message and has given them hope. All the Lord wants from us, is to be faithful. If we're faithful, then we can allow him to work through us. We can allow his power to work through us, because the power isn't in us. What is it that we are to do? What's the job that we have? Think about the parable of the sower. Our job is to sow the seed, right? Our job is to water the seed. Sometimes we think, our job is that we got to go out there and we got to convert the whole world. Well, Jesus didn't do that. Paul didn't do that. And Peter didn't do that. People resisted, right? And so you're in good company when people resist you too. But our job is to sow and to water. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, Paul, in writing to the church of Corinth, they've got division there. Some of them are saying, I'm of Apollos, I'm of Cephas, I'm of Paul. And Paul saying, that's crazy that you're separating yourselves like that. Christ isn't divided. But he says in verse 5 here of 1 Corinthians chapter 3, who then is Paul and who is Apollos? But ministers through whom you believed, as the Lord gave to each one. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So then neither he who plants is anything, nor he who waters, but God who gives the increase. Right? We don't have to do anything superhuman, just like those Israelites didn't have to do anything superhuman. All they had to do was be faithful and obedient. We don't have to do anything superhuman. We just have to be faithful and obedient and do what our job is. And our job is not to march around the city, but our job is to spread the word, and God will give the increase. And so in order for us to be faithful, we need to tell others about Jesus. Just think about what it was that God promised to the Israelites. All the things that he promised to them that they would have. He said that they would have a land that's flowing with milk and honey. They would have a land of plenty, right? Exodus chapter 3 and verse 8. So I've come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey. And so God tells Moses, I'm going to bring them out. I'm going to bring them to that particular land. They're going to have, pardon me, they're going to have houses that they did not build. They're going to have fields that they did not plant. They're going to eat of vineyards that they did not grow. Joshua talks about that in Joshua chapter 24 and verse 13. I'm running out of time, so I won't read that, but I'll give you the reference. They're not going to have to worry about enemies. They do what it is that God wants them to do. They're not going to have to worry. God's going to keep them safe. He's going to defeat all of their enemies. Their enemies aren't going to be able to stand against them. He says their women would not be barren. Their men would not be barren. Their livestock would produce. Their livestock would not be barren. Notice in Deuteronomy, I will read this one, Deuteronomy 7:13 and 14, the blessings that God would give them if they were faithful. It says, He will love you and bless you and multiply you. He will also bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your land, your grain and your new wine and your oil, the increase of your cattle and the offspring of your flock in the land of which He swore to your fathers to give you. You're going to have plenty. Field's going to produce, your animals are going to produce. In verse 14, He says, You shall be blessed above all peoples. There shall not be a male or female barren among you or among your livestock. Not going to have to deal with barrenness if you do what it is that the Lord wants them to do. And they would have been able to stay in the land forever, but it was conditional, right? It was conditional. Notice they had to do their part. Skip down to Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse 1. He says, Every commandment which I command you today, you must be careful to observe. Why? Why, God, do you want the children of Israel to keep every one of the commandments that you have given to them so that you may live? How many of them in the wilderness didn't live? A lot of them, right? A lot of them fell in the wilderness. Whole generation, right? I command you today that you must be careful to observe every commandment, right? That you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land of which the Lord swore to your fathers. You see, it was conditional. God's going to give them all of these things, but it's conditional. It's based on them being faithful. They had to be faithful. Like with the taking of the promised land, they had to be faithful. And when you look at Joshua chapter 1 and verse 2, come back to the beginning again. It's sort of interesting here. Joshua 1:2, it says, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. Notice he says, the land which I am giving to the children of Israel. In the process of happening, I am giving it to them. And then notice in verse 3, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you. Past tense. God's mind, He's already given it to them. It's already theirs. All they have to do is go out there and take it. He's already He's already gifted it to them, if you will. And so He's given it to them. It's a gift, but they still needed to be faithful, and they still needed to take the battlefield in order to lay claim to it. God's given it to them as a gift, but they had to take it. They had to do something in order to take it. God's given us the gift of His grace. Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. Got to have that, right? Got to have that. God's given us the gift of His grace. It's a free gift. Nothing that we can do to earn it. Nothing that we can do so that He owes it to us, right? But we have to remain faithful. We have to reach out and take it. In Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 6, it says, without faith, it's impossible to please Him. For those who come to God must believe that He is, and that He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. You might say, without faithfulness, it's impossible to please God, because those heroes of faith in Hebrews chapter 11, they didn't just believe one time. It was a lifetime, right? A lifestyle that they lived according to their faith, that they were faithful. In Revelation chapter 2 and verse 10, Scripture tells us, remain faithful unto death, and I'll give you the crown of life. Just like He's giving them the land, what's up with give, right? If He's given it to them, why do they have to go out into the battlefield? Because they have to do their part to reach out and take it, even though it's a gift that God has given to them. God's given us His grace. It's a free gift. But we might have to march around Jericho in order to get it. You get it? Any comments, questions? I'll even entertain snide remarks, even though it's not a Sunday morning. Jacob won't do that on Wednesday. Yeah.
Also, that Rahab's house is within the inner wall.
Probably between the walls, probably on the outer wall.
Thinking of the scarlet cord hanging down.
Yeah.
If it had been all the walls on the outer wall falling outward, then that I guess it would be difficult for that one little piece where the cord was hanging remain where it was, but I mean,
Well, archaeology shows that there was one section of the wall that didn't fall. Yeah, yeah, there was one section of the wall that didn't fall. Yeah. And that scarlet cord was probably an Ohio State banner, by the way. Probably an Ohio State banner, because that's the way of salvation. Yeah. Thank you for your comments and attention. I'll turn it over to Morgan for a song, and then Michael will have our devotional tonight.
Hopefully, I can get through this without having a coughing attack. My allergies have been bothering me this week. But on Sunday mornings here at this church, we've been studying the book of Revelation. We don't have a lot of visitors here tonight, but I'm just curious, any of our visitors, have you ever been in a class or been in a study that has gone from the beginning of Revelations to the end of Revelations complete? Two? Okay. A lot of times you'll find that a lot of people shy away from doing the book of Revelations. They feel intimidated by it, or it's too hard, or just don't want to take it on. But our minister Dale has taken it on. I just want to tell him I appreciate that, because we've gone from the beginning, verse 1, to the end, almost to the end, soon to the end of chapter 22, and it's been a really good study. And I just appreciate him taking that challenge on to do that, because I'm telling you, I've actually heard ministers say, I will not preach from Revelations because it's just too hard. Or people don't understand it, or I just don't want to do it. So a couple weeks ago, there was a lesson Dell was doing in Revelation 21, in verses 6 through 8. Let me read those real quick. And he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. The one who conquers will have this heritage, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, the murderers, the sexual immoral, the sorcerers, the idlers, adulterers, and liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death." So this list is a list of the lost, a list of people that are not going to have salvation. It's a list of people whose final destination is the lake of fire. It's a list of people, a group of people whose second death is going to be eternal condemnation. There's 8 specific groups listed here, and we're not going to go through 8 in a lot of detail with this 5 or 6 minute devotional. But 6 of the 8 we hear about frequently, I think, in different lists and different times throughout the Bible. The unbelieving, obviously people who reject God's offer of salvation are not going to heaven. The abominable, those who engage in deliberate moral corruption and detestable practices, they're not going to be in heaven. The sexually immoral, those who engage in sexual sins outside biblical marriage. Again, indicating the importance of marriage in God's eyes, those folks are not going to be in heaven. Murderers, obviously, people who take innocent lives. Sorcerers. A lot of people may not think about sorcerers today, but it's very real. And there's lots of people who engage in sorcery activity, whether it's witchcraft or adulterous practices or sorcery. They'll just worship pagan deities and spirits and attempts to bypass God's power and will. Idolaters, people who put anything, money, power, themselves, other gods, before the one true God. Those are pretty cut and dry, I think, and we talk about them on a regular basis. Now, the other two got me thinking a little bit. The cowardly. Who are the cowardly? This translates sometimes as fearful, refers to those who refuse to stand for Christ and the truth because they fear the world's persecution and consequences. In the original Greek, this points to the spiritual timidity and shrinking back times of crisis. In Mark 8:38, for whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. It's also talked about in Matthew 10:33, 2 Timothy 2:12, and 1 John 2:23. We have to be courageous in our Christian lives. We have to be willing to accept criticism, hostility, ostracism, harassment, discrimination. You know what? We've got to do it without contempt. We've got to be willing to know that that is part of living courageously for Christ. Jesus did not pick courageous men when he picked the disciples. They developed into courageous men after they dedicated themselves to Christ. And we need to do the same. If you walked up to someone and said, did you know all liars are going to be in hell? You might get a funny look because lying's become pretty accepted. And lying doesn't always, people don't think of lying as one of those really bad sins. And we even try to make light of it by saying, well, that was only a white lie. That was just a little lie. It wasn't really a big lie. This lying is talking about those who are characterized by ongoing deceit and hypocrisy and intentional denial of divine truth. Lying is contrary to God's nature. God is the embodiment of truth. In the New Testament, Jesus declares, I am the way, the truth, and the life in John 14:6. God is incapable of falsehood, and anything less than the truth opposes his holiness. Lying reflects the character of Satan. What's Satan known as? A liar and the father of lies. When people deceive others, the Bible views it as aligning with the spiritual darkness rather than the light of God. Lying harms relationships. All relationships. You cannot have a close relationship without honesty. The Bible condemns liars because deceit contradicts the very nature of God, who is defined as the ultimate truth. Lying breaks trust, destroys community, and misrepresents God's character, which is why Scripture associates falsehoods with sin and spiritual separation from God. Some of these groups that were listed, if you think about it, are merely restating the Ten Commandments in a different way. You shall have no other gods before me. You should not make idols. You shall not murder. You should not commit adultery. You should not give false testimony. So these should not be new. These should not be questioned. These groups are not the groups that we want to associate with or be part of in any way. When we awake, we need to put on the armor of God and we need to prepare for spiritual warfare. We need to be courageous and always be ready to challenge liars by fully trusting in Jesus and knowing the truth. So, what I'd like to do tonight is just challenge us to focus on those two in particular and reflect on our lives personally and say, how courageous am I? And how well can I recognize liars and be willing to stand up to them for God's sake? It's not an easy task, and that's why we have each other as brothers and sisters. to be encouraging to one another and to help each other. But this is what God expects. And we don't want to be in one of those groups of 8. They're going to be eternally condemned to the lake of fire. So if there's anything we can do for you this evening, and any way that we can help you, any way that we can pray for you, any way that we can be an encouragement to you, we have this song of invitation at this time, and just come forward and we'll do that with you.